Welcome, listeners, to a journey into one of the most misunderstood corners of the human mind with the social lens. I'm your host, Beatrice Goodwin, and today we're diving deep into the shadowy world of intrusive thoughts, those uninvited mental visitors that can make even the kindest person question their very soul. Say, you're standing on a bridge, looking down at the rushing water below, when suddenly your mind whispers, "What if I jumped?" You're holding your newborn baby, overwhelmed with love, when a horrifying thought flashes through your consciousness. What if I drop them? You're in an important meeting, trying to focus, when your brain decides to replay that embarrassing moment from high school in vivid detail. These, precisely, are called intrusive thoughts. If you've ever experienced moments like these, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not a bad person. You're simply human, equipped with a mind that sometimes feels like it's working against you. Today, we're going to explore why these thoughts happen, what they mean, and most importantly, how to break free from their grip. If you're intrigued by the workings of the mind and want to dive deeper into psychology and mental wellness, check out Scoob, an AI-powered podcast studio with a world of insightful podcasts, curated especially for you in a bite-sized format. Download it from the App Store or Play Store and start your journey to a better understanding of the mind, world, and everything in between today. So settle in, because we're about to illuminate the dark theater of the mind where intrusive thoughts perform their unwelcome shows. Let's start with one of the most misunderstood forms of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Primarily obsessional OCD, often called Pure O. Unlike the stereotypical image of someone washing their hands repeatedly or checking locks obsessively, Pure O operates entirely within the mind's theater. Imagine Sarah, a devoted mother of two who suddenly finds herself plagued by the thought, "What if I harm my children?" This isn't a fleeting worry. It's a persistent, intrusive thought that seems to attack her very identity as a loving parent. The thought comes with vivid mental images, overwhelming urges, and a crushing sense of guilt and shame. What makes Pure O so particularly torturous is a phenomenon called thought-action fusion, the cognitive distortion where sufferers perceive their thoughts as equivalent to actions. Sarah doesn't just have a disturbing thought. She experiences it as if it holds the same moral weight and reality as actually harming her children. The faulty logic follows a devastating pattern. If I think it, it must be true or might happen. These intrusive thoughts seem to have an uncanny ability to target what we hold most dear. If you're deeply religious, your mind might conjure blasphemous thoughts laced with sexual or aggressive content. If you pride yourself on being nonviolent, your obsessive thoughts might be hostile and aggressive. If you're exceedingly responsible, you might face intrusive urges to commit reckless acts like setting a fire in your own home or pushing a pedestrian into traffic. It's as if OCD has a malicious intelligence, exploiting our deepest fears and self-doubts. A heterosexual person might be tormented by homosexual imagery, not because there's anything wrong with homosexuality, but because it contradicts their self-concept. The thoughts depict us behaving in ways entirely contrary to who we believe ourselves to be. What's particularly insidious is how these thoughts evolve with our life stages. Preteens becoming aware of their budding independence might experience violent thoughts against their parents. Young adults contemplating partnerships might question their gender identity due to unwanted intrusive thoughts. Newlyweds facing the looming responsibilities of parenthood might suffer from thoughts about harming children. The process typically begins innocuously enough. An intrusive thought, image, or urge enters the mind. But then comes the catastrophic appraisal, where anxiety and worry explode. The OCD sufferer becomes caught in a persistent loop of intrusive thoughts and distorted appraisals, desperately employing various control strategies to reduce their anxiety, such as mental rituals or avoidance behaviors. But here's the cruel irony. While these strategies might provide temporary relief, they're short-lived, perpetuating a recurring cycle of obsession. The more we fight these thoughts, the stronger they seem to become, leading us deeper into a maze of doubt about our core identity and moral character. Now, you might wonder, if intrusive thoughts are such a problem, why not just think our way out of them? This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive aspects of mental health. Sometimes, thinking more actually makes things worse. Overthinking is like quicksand for the mind. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Picture this scenario. You're taking an important test, and you find yourself changing your answers multiple times in those final, nerve-wracking minutes. Or you want to reach out to an old friend, but spend an excessive amount of time perfecting the message before hitting send. These are the everyday manifestations of overthinking. But when it comes to intrusive thoughts, overthinking becomes particularly destructive. Let me walk you through the common patterns that trap overthinkers. First, there's the tendency to neglect intuition. An overthinker might ignore gut feelings that would guide them toward an obvious choice. Even when there's an inner sense of knowing the appropriate decision, they hesitate, unable to take action due to continuous mental evaluation. When dealing with intrusive thoughts, this means second-guessing every instinct that says, "This thought doesn't define me." Then comes complex thinking, dwelling excessively on every intricate factor involved in understanding these thoughts. Everything seems crucial once extensive thought is given. Why did I have this thought? What does it mean about me? What if I have it again? The mind becomes unable to narrow down to what truly matters. Premature thinking represents another trap, investing unnecessary time and energy in deliberating over thoughts that don't require immediate resolution. Someone might spend hours analyzing why they had a disturbing thought about their relationship when they haven't even had their morning coffee yet. Perhaps most insidiously, there's avoidance thinking, where a person subconsciously seeks to dodge particular actions or decisions. They create elaborate justifications for not proceeding with normal life activities, accumulating excuses to avoid situations where intrusive thoughts might arise. But this avoidance only strengthens the thought's power. Overthinkers often engage in problem creation, sensing issues where none exist. A simple intrusive thought gets convoluted under the weight of needless scrutiny, leading to perceived problems that weren't initially there. They lose sight of the bigger picture, becoming engulfed by smaller issues that cloud their ability to see beyond immediate concerns. The hallmark of overthinking in relation to intrusive thoughts is rumination, replaying scenarios over and over in the mind. Whether it's past encounters, situations, or future fears, dwelling longer than necessary on such thoughts creates an incessant mental churn that leads to emotional and physical exhaustion. This repetitive thinking often manifests in conversations too. If friends or family often point out that you've reiterated similar concerns about your thoughts before, this could signal an excessive tendency to brood over situations that would be better left unexplored. As we delve deeper into the landscape of intrusive thoughts, we encounter another player in this mental drama, the inner critic. This isn't just any voice. It's actually a chorus of 4 distinct characters, each with their own destructive specialty. David D. Burns, renowned for his work in anxiety management, identified these 4 primary forms of negative self-talk that can fuel and amplify intrusive thoughts. Think of them as 4 different actors on the stage of your mind, each waiting for their moment in the spotlight. First, meet the worrier. This character specializes in anxiety-provoking statements that begin with "what if?" What if I embarrass myself? What if I lose control? What if having this intrusive thought means I'm dangerous? The worrier impedes progress by reigniting fears and leaving individuals mentally paralyzed. When overpowered by the worrier, you might feel transported back to a childlike state of helplessness, completely forgetting your adult capabilities and resources. Next comes the critic, the internal voice that fuels low self-esteem through harsh judgments. That was stupid. Can't you ever get anything right? What kind of person thinks these horrible thoughts? The critic continuously underscores perceived flaws and shortcomings, making self-assessment more punitive than constructive. When intrusive thoughts arise, the critic is quick to pass judgment on both the thought and the person having it. Then we have the victim, with its mantra anchored in phrases like, I can't, or I'll never be able to. I can't control my thoughts. I'll never be normal. I'm fundamentally broken. This voice perpetuates feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, which can spiral into depression. The victim voice often emerges from shame, reinforcing the belief that one is fundamentally flawed or unworthy. Finally, there's the perfectionist, setting the stage for chronic stress through demands like, I should, I have to, or I must. I should never have disturbing thoughts. I must be in complete control of my mind. I have to figure out what these thoughts mean. The perfectionist pressures individuals into relentless striving and sets impossibly high standards for mental control. What's particularly insidious about these voices is how they interact with intrusive thoughts. When an unwanted thought arises, the worrier asks, what if this means something terrible about me? The critic jumps in with, you're disgusting for thinking that. The victim responds with, I can't handle this. I'm broken. And the perfectionist demands, you must eliminate these thoughts completely. These voices create a perfect storm of self-torture. They take a normal mental phenomenon, intrusive thoughts, and transform it into evidence of personal failure, moral corruption, or the psychological damage. They create secondary suffering on top of the initial discomfort of the unwanted thought. But here's what's crucial to understand. These voices aren't telling you the truth. They're learned patterns, often from childhood messages that have been internalized over time. Just as they were learned, they can be unlearned and replaced with healthier, more accurate internal dialogue. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of intrusive thoughts is how they can infiltrate and poison our closest relationships. Imagine trying to connect authentically with others while battling a secret war in your mind. It's like trying to have a conversation during an earthquake. Intrusive thoughts about relationships can emerge in countless scenarios. Picture this. You're with your partner, having what should be an intimate moment, when suddenly unsettling thoughts arise that are difficult to decipher. Maybe it's a sexual encounter that triggers unwanted imagery or doubts about your feelings. These relationship experiences create complex emotions that can leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself and your connections. Sometimes the thoughts center around fear of consequences. You might upset someone and immediately spiral into catastrophic thinking about potential repercussions. What if they never forgive me? What if this ruins everything? The mind becomes a theater of worst-case scenarios, all triggered by normal interpersonal friction. Boundary violations create another category of relationship intrusions. When someone approaches you under the influence or behaves inappropriately, when your personal decisions are overridden, or when someone tastes your meal without consent, these experiences can trigger cascades of intrusive thoughts about safety, respect, and autonomy. The thoughts can be surprisingly specific and mundane. Feeling rushed or having your timing disrespected might trigger thoughts about being controlled. Invasive questioning upon arriving home or at work can spark mental spirals about privacy and independence. A pushy sales attempt might invade your mental space with thoughts about manipulation and vulnerability. Social settings become particularly challenging when intrusive thoughts about relationships are active. A family member's public behavior might embarrass you, triggering thoughts about association and judgment. Meeting new people or having first-time experiences can become anxiety-inducing when your mind is already in hypervigilant mode. Political or religious discussions become minefields when they clash with your beliefs or trigger thoughts about conflict and compatibility. Witnessing acts of bigotry or discrimination can spark intrusive thoughts about safety, justice, and your place in the world. Perhaps most painful are the thoughts that arise around authority figures. fears of being questioned, accused, or threatened by bosses, government agencies, or law enforcement. Even simple facial expressions, a look of impatience, disgust, or rage, can communicate rejection or judgment, instilling intrusive thoughts about worthiness and acceptance. The cruel irony is that these intrusive thoughts often attack our most treasured relationships, precisely because they matter so much to us. If you didn't care deeply about your connections with others, your mind wouldn't generate such elaborate scenarios about losing them. What makes this particularly challenging is the secrecy that often surrounds intrusive thoughts. You might be sitting across from someone you love, engaged in normal conversation, while simultaneously battling thoughts that feel shameful or dangerous to share. This creates a double life: the public self that appears normal and the private self that feels tormented. The fear of judgment keeps these thoughts hidden, which only amplifies their power. When we can't share our mental struggles, we lose the opportunity for reality testing and support. We begin to believe we're uniquely damaged or dangerous, when in fact, we're experiencing something fundamentally human. Intrigued to explore the complexities of intimacy, connection, and the mind, check out Scoob, AI-curated podcast app that dive deep into these themes with empathy and insight. Download Scoob from the App Store or Play Store and discover stories and tools to help you navigate the dance of desire, the mind, and connection. Perhaps nowhere is the interference of intrusive thoughts more complex than in our most intimate moments. Sexual thoughts and experiences occupy a unique space in human consciousness. They can be pleasurable or painful, filled with fantasies or guilt, driven by desire or marred by disappointment. For many people, sexual associations don't lean toward the positive. Instead, they're shrouded in dissatisfaction, shame, and confusion. When intrusive thoughts enter this already complex landscape, they can transform what should be moments of connection into battlegrounds of the mind. The reality is that people tend to think about sex with greater frequency than they actually engage in it. This is often because many aren't having genuinely fulfilling, intimate experiences. Sexual energy becomes repressed and misdirected in ways that might be unhealthy or lacking in authentic connection. But here's where things get particularly interesting. Thoughts during sexual encounters serve as a profound distraction. Thoughts are products of the mind, distinct from the physical body where sexual activities actually occur. Yet these thoughts have the power to significantly affect the body and the entire experience that follows. I find it fascinating how thoughts can disconnect us from the intricate and subtle sensations of the body. Many people are startled by how easily the mind drifts into unrelated thoughts during intimate moments. It's unexpected to have random, non-sexual thoughts intrude, pulling attention away from being fully present. There's often a naive expectation that sex should be an all-encompassing event, one that takes over both mind and body, to the extent that thoughts themselves would be obliterated. But the mind has a natural tendency to wander, both in routine life and during sexual exploration. It's as if the mind slides in from the side, distracting and dimming the inner light and delicate sensations that the body offers. When intrusive thoughts specifically target sexuality, they can create additional layers of confusion and shame. Someone might experience unwanted sexual imagery during non-sexual situations, or conversely, disturbing non-sexual thoughts during intimate moments. These experiences can lead to questioning one's sexual orientation, desires, or moral character. The thoughts might involve scenarios completely contrary to one's values or interests. A committed partner might experience intrusive thoughts about infidelity. Someone who values consent and respect might have unwanted aggressive sexual imagery. These thoughts can feel like betrayals of one's authentic self and relationships. What's particularly cruel is how these thoughts can poison the well of intimacy. When your mind becomes associated with unwanted sexual content, it can become difficult to access genuine desire and connection. The fear of triggering intrusive thoughts can lead to avoidance of intimacy altogether, creating distance in relationships that depend on physical and emotional closeness. However, there's hope in understanding that mental wandering during intimate moments is actually normal. Once this shift is identified through heightened awareness, it becomes possible to reverse the distraction. By consciously reconnecting with the body, one can re-engage with physical sensations. Even during moments when thoughts take over, the inner sensitivity doesn't entirely disappear. The body's internal dynamic continues spiraling beneath the surface. The delicate sense of awareness and sensory perception is often overshadowed by persistent thoughts, but it remains accessible. Now we arrive at one of the most counterintuitive discoveries in psychology. Trying not to think about something virtually guarantees you'll think about it more. This phenomenon, discovered by psychologist Daniel Wegner, is called ironic rebound, and it's the cruel joke that our brains play on us when we try to control our thoughts. Picture this scenario. I tell you not to think about a white bear. Don't imagine its fluffy white fur, its black nose, or the way it might lumber through a snowy forest. What's happening in your mind right now? You're probably thinking about a white bear, aren't you? This same principle applies devastatingly to intrusive thoughts. When you make conscious efforts to not think about something, that very thought tends to linger persistently in your mind. But here's where it gets even more insidious. The more you attempt to suppress a thought, the more it recurs, leading to the mistaken belief that the thought must hold some truth. After all, why else would it persistently return? Human nature inclines us to regard our thoughts as vital indicators of reality. When a thought repeatedly emerges and becomes difficult to dismiss, it begins to seem like a crucial signal that warrants attention. This tendency is rooted in a cognitive bias ingrained in our brains. We judge the probability or validity of something based on how readily it comes to mind. Consider the example of plane crash fears. If you're a nervous flyer, those vivid news stories about aviation disasters come easily to mind, leading you to overestimate the actual risk. In reality, the likelihood of a plane crash is about 1 in 14 million. Yet most people feel the risk is higher than dying from diseases like nephritis or septicemia, two leading causes of death that don't immediately spring to mind. Daniel Wegner once received a distressing call from a student who couldn't stop contemplating suicide. Despite this being merely a fleeting thought initially, it had entrenched itself in her mind, convincing her that she must genuinely desire self-harm. She reasoned that if the idea persisted, it must be true. Wegner, while not trained as a crisis counselor, provided insight based on his white bear research. He explained that when people try to suppress a thought, it tends to reemerge more forcefully in consciousness. This doesn't signify the thought's authenticity or significance. The student experienced relief upon understanding that her reaction to recurrent suicidal thoughts amplified their intensity, but it didn't equate to genuinely wanting to end her life. This concept applies universally to intrusive thoughts. You might worry about a loved one being in an accident or battle, an insistent craving. Suppressing these thoughts out of panic only results in their reappearance with heightened urgency. Their recurrence feels more substantial, simply because of the initial attempt to ignore them. Every time you try to push away an intrusive thought, you're actually strengthening it. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more forcefully it springs back to the surface. With every return, the thought gains more credibility in your mind. The worrier grows more anxious, the doubter becomes more convinced of danger, and the cycle perpetuates itself. Any fear or desire you strive to suppress becomes more persuasive and alluring. The act of suppression sends a message to your brain that this thought is important, dangerous, and worthy of attention. It's a cognitive trap that transforms normal mental static into seemingly significant signals. The cruel irony is that the very effort to control our thoughts, motivated by the desire to feel better, ends up making us feel worse. We become trapped in a prison of our own making, where the keys to freedom seem to be the very thoughts we're trying to escape. If suppression doesn't work, then what does? The answer lies in understanding how attention actually functions in the human brain. Rather than trying to block out unwanted thoughts, we need to learn how to redirect our mental spotlight. Imagine your brain as a vast theater with countless actors, scenes, and stories playing out simultaneously. The human brain is constantly inundated with an immense flow of information every moment of the day. If our brains attempted to process every piece of this abundant information, it would hinder our ability to function effectively. Therefore, the brain is selective about what it focuses on. Your attention is like a powerful spotlight in this theater. You possess the ability to control where this spotlight shines, though you don't have control over the actors that appear on stage. You cannot dictate their duration on stage, what they say, or when they make an exit. Your role is simply to direct the focus of this spotlight to one or two aspects at a time. When you concentrate on anxious thoughts that depict catastrophic scenarios or evoke images of personal failure, these thoughts convey negative feedback to the brain, reinforcing a belief that circumstances are distressing. Conversely, redirecting this spotlight onto alternative thoughts that narrate a different, more positive story can influence your physical response as well. Here's the crucial difference between suppression and redirection. While focusing on uplifting thoughts, the anxious ones may still linger in the background, waiting for the limelight to return. However, deprived of that focused attention, they wield significantly less influence over your emotional state. This practice is distinct from blocking thoughts out entirely. Remember, trying to expunge a thought from your mind often makes it recur with greater frequency. By fixating on avoiding anxious thoughts, you inadvertently direct your mental spotlight onto them, giving them exactly what they crave: attention. Instead, choosing to refocus this spotlight on other thoughts allows intrusive thoughts to persist without being central figures in your mental narrative. Their presence is acknowledged, but they don't dominate the scene. It's like having background music playing while you're engaged in a conversation. You might be aware of it, but it's not commanding your attention. When anxiety-driven thoughts arise and are illuminated by your mental spotlight, leading to rumination on feared future events, this triggers a physiological response. Each time you envision the worst-case scenario, where calamity strikes and you're unable to handle it, you're constructing a mental experience that informs your brain's understanding of the world. Repetition of these thoughts makes it increasingly effortless for your brain to replicate such scenarios. You're essentially training your brain to be an expert at generating anxiety and fear. But the beautiful thing about neuroplasticity is that this process works both ways. The direction of your attention spotlight plays a pivotal role in shaping your experiences. When you consistently redirect your attention toward constructive, calming, or neutral thoughts, you're training your brain to default to these patterns instead. You're building new neural highways while allowing the old, worn paths of intrusive thinking to become overgrown with disuse. Learning to command your mental spotlight is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. It's not just about avoiding negativity. It's about actively building a more resilient and optimistic internal narrative. This skill takes practice, patience, and compassion for yourself as you learn. As we near the end of our journey through the landscape of intrusive thoughts, we arrive at what many consider the most powerful tool for freedom: mindfulness. But this isn't the commercialized, superficial mindfulness you might see advertised. This is a deep, transformative practice that can fundamentally change your relationship with your own mind. The core message for individuals learning to manage intrusive thoughts through mindfulness is profound. By strengthening what we might call the impartial spectator, that wise, observing part of your consciousness, and practicing mindful awareness, you can enhance your mental faculties across all dimensions of life. Think of the impartial spectator as a wise, compassionate observer who can watch your thoughts without being swept away by them. This isn't about becoming emotionally detached or robotic. It's about developing the capacity to observe your mental content with curiosity rather than judgment, with interest rather than fear. This enhancement of mindful awareness acts as a conduit for improvement in various aspects of life, including interpersonal relationships, professional environments, and personal challenges such as mind wandering and excessive daydreaming. By addressing these issues through mindfulness, individuals can make significant strides in areas where persistent cravings and distractions often lead to emotional pain and distress. For instance, a substantial amount of mental and emotional energy is frequently expended on overthinking and anxiety about personal relationships. The practice of observing and redirecting, coupled with the deployment of the impartial spectator, proves particularly effective in curbing the intense ruminations that most individuals experience under stress. Many people struggling with intrusive thoughts have successfully taught themselves to disrupt patterns of obsessive thinking through the power of what we might call relabeling and mental note-taking. This practice enables them to redirect attention and energy, placing them on a healthier mental path. Initially, it may seem peculiar to remind yourself of your own thoughts, yet developing this skill is crucial. It's like becoming a kind, scientific observer of your own mental processes. I notice I'm having the thought that, or I'm observing anxiety arising. This simple practice of mental noting creates space between you and your thoughts. As proficiency in mindful awareness increases, the process of making mental notes becomes more instinctual. This results in a revelation of the extent to which we unknowingly dwell on unnecessary or harmful thoughts. It's often shocking to discover how much mental real estate we've been giving to thoughts that don't serve us. The benefits of these practices are universal. For those dealing with severe intrusive thoughts, mastering mindfulness culminates in the acquisition of valuable skills that enhance life quality, capabilities that many people never develop. It's like using an exercise machine for mental resilience, elevating your capacity for employing the impartial spectator. One of the most astonishing revelations that mindful awareness provides is the realization that simply observing the content of your thoughts can steer them toward healthier and more constructive directions. Being cognizant of your thoughts tends to guide the mind away from negative ruminations toward more positive and productive topics. Mindfulness itself represents a beneficial and wholesome mental state. During any period in which the mind engages with mindful awareness, the emergence of detrimental thoughts is naturally prevented. Consequently, prolonged periods of mindful awareness lead to a fortified mind, diminishing the occurrence of negative thoughts that foster pain and suffering. The mind's transition from a mindful to a negative state can happen with startling speed, but the positive aspect is that reapplying mindful awareness can just as swiftly restore a wholesome mental state. Interrupting a stream of negative thoughts with simple mental acknowledgement, I am now thinking a thought related to fear, or I notice worry arising, can itself foster further constructive thoughts. As we reach the end of our exploration into the hidden world of intrusive thoughts, I want you to take a moment and breathe. If you've recognized yourself in any of these descriptions, if you've felt the sting of the inner critic, the trap of suppression, or the confusion of unwanted mental visitors, know that you are not alone, and more importantly, you are not broken. What we've discovered together today is that intrusive thoughts are not windows into our souls. They're glitches in our mental software. They're the price we pay for having brains capable of imagination, empathy, and complex reasoning. The same neural networks that allow us to plan for the future, care deeply about others, and hold strong moral values, occasionally misfire and produce content that contradicts everything we stand for. Remember the key insights we've explored. Suppression strengthens unwanted thoughts, while redirection offers genuine relief. The inner critic's voices, the worrier, the critic, the victim, and the perfectionist, are learned patterns that can be unlearned. Your attention is a spotlight you can learn to control, even when you can't control what appears on the stage of your mind. If you're struggling with intrusive thoughts that interfere with your daily life, please remember that professional help is available. therapists trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness-based approaches can provide personalized guidance for your specific situation. Your thoughts do not define you. Your responses to those thoughts, your choices about where to place your attention, how to treat yourself, and how to move forward despite mental noise. These are what reveal your true character. I'm your host, Beatrice Goodwin, and this has been The Social Lens, a journey into the hidden landscapes of the mind and soul. If you're ready to keep exploring the depths of human experience and uncover more stories that inspire growth and healing, Scoob is your perfect companion. This AI-powered podcast app curates a world of insightful shows tailored to your curiosity and well-being. Download Scoob from the App Store or Play Store, and let it be your guide on the path to self-discovery and empowerment. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You're doing better than you think, and your journey is just beginning.